So actually we don't have so much time. So some of the formalities I will try to make really short. I hope it doesn't feel impolite. Maybe first of all, I would like to invite you to make yourself comfortable. So if you feel like you want to lie down and listen and don't watch, go ahead. Actually, the only thing that I really need from you is attention. There are different ways of paying attention, I think I can notice. So if you feel like, oh, I think I should lie down for a minute, go ahead. I don't feel offended by that. The other thing that I need from you is maybe that when I'm talking, you figure out if there are things where you want to connect, maybe something that's of special interest for you, or maybe something where you think, well, I don't think that's true, or whatever. So I'm very happy about objections or so, because I intend to speak something like 20 minutes or so, and then I would be happy to have a conversation for you. But as far as I'm prepared, I do not have a concrete question to you to open the conversation, so I would ask you to engage from what you bring, from what I say, but maybe you have something that I don't refer to and you bring it yourself. You're invited to contribute whatever you like. All right. Are we set, Mirko? Are you filming already, right? Okay. Right. Okay. Good morning. There's Teresa. Walter is not here, so I say thank you into that direction for being invited to the festival to speak a little bit about dramaturgy. I'm very happy always to talk about that. My name is Matthias Quabbe, and I will just very briefly introduce myself, actually only in order to describe the position from where I speak. So I'm working as a freelance dramaturge in choreography, in contemporary dance and choreography. I used to work for a long time at Kampnagel and the Choreographic Center K3 Tanzplan Hamburg in Hamburg. The time that I worked in the Choreographic Center K3, I was working as a dramaturg, but also as a kind of production manager. I was mainly in charge of the residency programs at K3. And what was very unique about that was that I was, on the one hand, dramaturg, so I was supporting the artists and residents in their research and creation. But I was also working like a manager, taking care of basically all the organizational aspects of the residency programs. So my work there for 12 years was very much intertwined art and organization, which is still, I would say, conditioning the way I work as a freelance dramaturg, where I'm basically only focusing on the artistic part of the dramaturgical work. As a freelance dramaturg, I write, I teach, I work with choreographers, and when I work with choreographers, that's very much about research, development of artistic concepts, sometimes for funding, sometimes for productions, and I'm working with them on creating productions. And speaking here to you today, I will speak from my perspective of the experience that I have from the work as a dramaturg in the Choreographic Center K3 and in choreographic productions, free production that I've been involved with. And starting out from that perspective, I would open my lecture with a thesis saying, bless you, with a hypothesis saying there is no such thing as dramaturgy. It's a myth. It's a fata morgana, if you wish. Like you come out of a show, maybe you watched a premiere maybe it was even a colleague you know or a friend or so, and then you start talking about what you just saw, and it was so, and you say, wow, the set design was really nice, wow, they were so great dancers and stuff, and then you go, yeah, but the dramaturgy, I don't know. And then what is that?
I talk about dramaturgy.
Yeah.
It's the first thing I'm after the show.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's this inner logic there.
Right.
Somehow that the afterwards, especially
Right.
just the visual
Yeah.
things. No?
So what I'm aiming at when I say there is no such thing as dramaturgy, it's a myth. I could also say it's a crutch, because there are so many things, like the word dramaturgy containing so many different aspects. It is a huge term to approach something, but when we just use it as this kind of term, it brings two problems. The first one is it implies that there is some kind of, as you also said, some kind of inner logic to what we just saw, like a magic function that is somehow invisible, but in a way perceivable. You can describe things, but it's hidden. You can't really point at it, so it's maybe there or not there. And the second thing is that the term dramaturgy, when we work, implies that that there is a tool to help us implement that magic function into the production that we are creating. And yes, there is a truth about those two approaches, but actually when we talk about making work, making choreography, making productions, it doesn't help us to make the work that we want to do. It is an irritation, it's an obstacle, and the point is that, or my point in that is that when we think of dramaturgy like that, it narrows down what we're aiming at. It narrows down what we're trying to do, and what we actually need for our work is an idea of dramaturgical practice and not dramaturgy. And dramaturgical practice is something that helps us to open a field in which we can move together with other people. And that dramaturgical practice is something that I want to talk about briefly. What, from my experience and from my perspective, what it contains. I have a little list I prepared to name certain aspects, and then I will point out three distinctive things that are, from my perspective, very important and maybe most interesting. I will describe it briefly, and then we can start discussing what you think about that. So, dramaturgical practice, as I consider it, is a practice of first conceptual work. Conceptual work as in creating a basis and a frame for the things that you're going to do, making an outline of where you're going to go and what you will deal with. Dramaturgical practice is a practice of creating and organizing material that you're working with, having an overview on what you're creating throughout a process, sorting it, so arranging it in relation to another, but also in an overall perspective that you have, and sorting out, so deciding what's in, what's out. We're all doing so many things, and I think most of us are not really lacking interest and ideas. So sometimes the most difficult task that we're facing is to decide what we're not going to do. And that is part of creating and organizing material. Composition. Composition is something that is part of the creation and organization of the material, but much more focusing the actual production of a piece. So it's very much about decision making, sometimes conclusive decision making. Sometimes it's about creating a narrative out of the composition. Part of dramaturgical practice is designing collaboration, creating ways of how you work together. So there are not only artistic aspects about dramaturgical practice, but also aspects of around artistic work, which are organizational, work organization, etc. And all of that is, I would call, working together as a dramaturgical practice. Publishing. There is in a way an inevitability to what we're doing, that at some point we're going to put it out there, which is a decisive moment for the things that we do, that we say, I will now show it to somebody. So we will publish something, there is an invitation to that, and part of dramaturgical practice is to formulate that invitation. And maybe not even in the moment that you publish, but before. And maybe that's part of the conceptual work that we're doing in the frame of dramaturgical practice. And then last but not least on my list, for today at least, speaking about choreography, speaking about what we're doing, maybe writing about it, but in a way communicating what we're doing, how we're doing it. An incomplete list, but maybe for now enough that for me is covering mainly the field of dramaturgical practice, how I look at it. And I want to point out three aspects of that a little bit in detail, which is the conceptual work, the creation and organization of material, and working together. So, we're good in time. Conceptual work. Actually, I think there is always a concept. It's basically not possible to do anything without having a concept. For me, the question is, are you conscious about the concept or not? Are you working with the concept or not? Are you working on the concept or not? And that is for me one of the main aspects of dramaturgical practice, to know the concept, to work on the concept, and to work with it. And the concept in this context, well, maybe first in English, the word concept has many different meanings. So when I say concept here, I'm speaking about artistic concepts as basis for choreographic work that we're doing. And those concepts that I'm talking about are not a rigid plan to follow. I sometimes hear, oh yes, concepts, but what about the process? And then I usually say, this is not contradictory. This is not the one or the other. This is an entanglement of maybe even the same thing, the concept and the process. Because the concept that I'm talking about is something that is marking a field in which you can say, this is my interest. This is what I want to be involved with. This is what I will follow. Maybe you can even say, this is the center of it all. You can definitely say, here it somewhere ends, and here it somewhere begins. Maybe that's a bit blurry and not a sharp line, but you can somehow say a little bit like this, which means this is out, this is in. And here it's maybe a little bit in between, but you can sure say this is the field that we're talking about. And this field has maybe some distinctive points where you can say, when we move through this field, we can even orient on those distinctive points, like landmarks or so. The concept is solid, it's flexible, and it's dynamic. And the dynamic aspect of the concept is something that relates to what I will say a little bit later about how a project in total develops. Because the concept is not a plan that you make in the beginning and then everybody has to follow the plan. And then somebody has a process and you say, no, we have a plan. But you have a concept and there's a reciprocal relationship between the process that you have and the material that is generated out of the process that you have and the concept that you're working with. So the concept develops dynamically during your practice, during the process, while you develop your project, and will always shift a little bit. And if you have dramatic turns in your project, it may even flip. Maybe. That's hard to handle, but it can happen. But basically, I would say the concept is something like an organism that is shifting with what you're doing, and where things relate to another. It's in a way an arranged collection of items that you refer to, that you want to work with, and part of that, I would say, are also wishes that you have, maybe expectations, desires. I usually want to be part of a concept, convictions, but not convictions in terms of opinion or content, but more convictions in terms of convictions about art, convictions about how you want to make art. This is also part of the concept, and maybe that even shifts from project to project, depending on what your main interest is that you're circling around with what you're doing. And looking at it like this, we could say you could write something like legal terms to your project or to your work. You know, do you all know what legal terms are? In German, it's the AGB, Allgemeine Geschäftsbedingungen. It's the small thing written next to the contract where you can say, no matter how you define or create the design the contract, there's things which are always valid. So those are the legal terms, and there you could say something about authorship, for instance. You could say something about space. You could say something about duration. You could say something about care. And there are a lot of terms that we can name at that point. And I would say, for instance, that all of those terms are inside the term dramaturgy. And I have a list of those terms. It's in a way endless, and I would invite you or recommend that you make a list for yourself where you say those are interesting or important terms for my work. Maybe starting with body, extension, proximity, intensity, duration, rhythm, course, order, up, down, exit, access, all dramaturgical terms. And you can name all of them as you need. That's all inside the term dramaturgy. My second point, create and organize material. For me, it's always been very hard to define, somehow mystic question of where, how, when does the project actually even start? So if you look back, you had dance productions or projects that you made, and you have to name the very first point where it starts. I talked to quite a few choreographers about that, and actually nobody was really able to say, for that project I can tell you it was that moment I had that idea, and that's where everything started. And the nice thing about this is that it's actually creating a sense of maybe a big term, too big, but anyway, eternity. I usually work with the term continuum. So there is no such thing as a blank page. Sometimes when we talk about the work that we do and relate it to like acting, theater, or music or so, we can sometimes say, yeah, but there's a written drama or there's already a notation from where people start, and we start from blank page. But that's only true in relation to what other people do, but actually for ourselves, I would say there's no blank page. There's always something that you've done before. There's always something that you experienced before, maybe productions that you saw, conversations that you had, things that you did yourself. And when you start a project, the first spark of the project will always come out of that somehow. And that has for me, that has a very calming effect, because I know that there is a basis always for what I'm doing, and things are coming out of that. And maybe the start of a project is usually not much more than within that ocean of everything that's there, noticing something. Oops. It's calm, and then oops, wow, that's interesting. And then you follow, and maybe that's all what the project is doing. And then you follow that thing, and then you figure out, oh, next day it still interests me somehow. So you start getting involved with it, and then suddenly it's a little bit bigger than yesterday. There's something that you created around it. Maybe there's a second thing that you noticed, and you start to connect it. That's the start of conceptual work, I would say, because then you notice things, you notice relations, you notice effects, you notice if things are wide or deep. You address qualities, attributions, etc., and that is exactly how we create the material that we're working with, while we're working on the concept that is the basis for that material. And I would always say the material that we create is always coming to life in between the concept that we have and the practice that you bring. And in between that, the material is actually happening. So if you wish, you could also look at it like a trinity of concept, practice, material. And it's reciprocal, it's interrelational, and it's an evolving organism in a way. There's a very interesting essay from Maaike Bleeker called Thinking No One's Thought. And she's referring to something that Guattari and Deleuze named in their book, What is Philosophy, in terms of thinking. I had discussions about material, working choreographic material on the one hand, and thinking on the other hand. And the way they are talking about thinking is that if you work with people, ideally the thinking that is happening is not each individual person thinking, and then you tell each other what you thought or what you think, but the thinking is something that, how they say, transpires in the group, and is happening like a movement that you have together. And then the spark that comes out of it is actually happening in between you, and not in one person saying, now I know and I can tell you. But it's something where you can say the thinking is something that we're doing together as a mutual movement that we're doing. And then there's not the opposition of the thinking and the moving, the dramaturgical thought and the choreographic material anymore, but it's happening together. And that leads me to the third part that I want to briefly address, the working together. Dramaturgical practice, for me, it's very important to not only see as artistic work on content, aesthetics, composition, etc., but also to see it as a work that is very much depending on and determined by how we work together. And the first thing that I want to point out is that when you do projects, no matter what kind of project, if it's a research project or a production or a book or whatever, those projects have working phases. And those working phases are bring different qualities. They have different effects on what you're doing and how you work with the concept, with other people. And I think that it's very important to be aware and maybe describe for yourself, maybe for each project even, what kind of working phases do you actually have. I, for myself, for instance, just to give you an example, when I think about productions, I give it usually three main phases. The first phase is the phase of idea, development, and concept. That's the first phase, and that's usually happening before writing an application for funding. So there's an idea, I try to figure out what's part of this idea and develop that, and then I make it a concept so I can turn it into an application. It's very much defined by the fact that first I'm very insecure about if that really makes sense, and in the end I'm very insecure because that funding deadline is just a terrible thing and messes up with what I'm doing. And then if I'm lucky enough to get the funding, there's a second phase which I call research process design, and that is very much defined by there's the funding, and then I first think, hooray, funding, great, thank you, and then I think, wow, who wrote that? Because it's probably months that I handed in the funding, and I don't know anymore what I did. And then it's also the language for an application, so not really anything to work with in a production, so I have to get back to there and rework it in order to make it workable for the production, which is included in researching on what we're going to do, probably making a concept again. Then we have a working process with all the things that you know from the studio, and the last phase, design, where we all know premiere is close, so there's no fuzzing and discussing around anymore. We have to get that done and make decisions, and that's it. That's the design. And then my third working phase of productions is usually after the premiere, with cleaning up the studio, the stage, myself, my apartment, sorting out, figuring out what was that, looking back a little bit, and alignment in terms of what's coming next, what am I taking out of that for next. There are other ways to define working phases. Maybe you do that on your own. You can say there's only two, like imagine and make. I don't know. The important thing about the working phases is that when you work with a concept and working on the concept, it will be different in each working phase. What the concept is, what it will do, what it can provide, what you have to do for it, and it will always shift like I don't know, a mutating algorithm that is constantly firing information with what's going on. And the second aspect, which I find very important about the working phases, is that when you think of those phases of your work, and also maybe how it relates to conceptual work and creating material, there's a dramaturgy in this as well. So it's not only the piece that you're working on that maybe then has some kind of dramaturgy. There's a dramaturgy from the first moment, that spark of having an idea, to the last moment where you say, okay, this is the last note that I take after the premiere, reflecting on what I did. And that range of time and making and doing. There is something like a dramaturgy in terms of maybe even a topography when you go through a landscape or so, and it has different air pressure, different kind of climate, whatever. So when you come with the interests, the wishes, and the needs and necessities, conditions, etc., that are maybe part of the concept that you can describe, they will all shift throughout that project from one moment to the other, maybe. And when we work together, we usually have different positions. We are in one project, but we have different positions working in that. They're very often named as dancer, choreographer, dramaturg, technician, etc. Those positions bring also different situations where you not only have a position, but you also have a role in the project as a person. And you have a task or a function, so there's something that you are supposed to do. You bring ability or capability that is the basis for accomplishing that task, or maybe not. And there is a certain kind of responsibility that you have in the whole project. And for me, this relation of position, role, function, task, ability, and responsibility is creating for each field of working within a project different conditions. And then you could imagine that each person in one project has even a different dramaturgy. So when, for me, pressure is going down, like for me, that as a dramaturg, that's usually the premiere day, because then I think, okay, work is done. I lean back and I enjoy the show. And for dancers, pressure is going to the peak, right? And in that range of, for me, it's like, wow, you will do that, I'm sure, it's really cool, I saw that you can do it. And for you, the pressure is going up, you think, wow, there's all those colleagues and friends out there, wow, and now I have to do it. In that range, we have to communicate on that day on some things that are still to do and solve. And having that in mind as a dramaturgy that is happening for each one, I think that is very important for working together and accomplishing projects in a good way and also in a healthy way, in a certain way. So saying all that, I missed out speaking about the audience. I didn't speak about access, and actually something that is sometimes important for me, or very important for me, but that's too much. I didn't speak about the question how to find an end. And I named it a little bit before in terms of what is not part, or what is not part of the concept. For me, that relates very strongly to the question of when is it enough? So when do you say, now we're done? I know that usually people say we're done just the moment before doors open, and there's no other way to do it. My personal question would be, are there other moments where we can say from our side, that's it, we're done? And that maybe relates to the concept that we made in the beginning, because we can tell what we schemed, what we imagined. We lived up to that. And that's why we can say we're done, even though premiere day is tomorrow. That's all I wanted to say to you. It was a little bit longer than I thought. And now I would like to invite you to tell me what you think about it, or if you have something to add or questions. Yes.
I was just a bit curious because you said this, just if you could maybe elaborate a bit, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Because I, yesterday, me and my friend here, we talked about actually like this kind of interesting thing when, for me, it's often like a very imaginal concept somehow of a stage production that I would like to do, but for her it's maybe more like this process, interest of a process. And you said that they are quite intertwined, but if, for instance, like I was just curious what you mean about like how do you feel like the concept that they are somehow, like I don't know, I was just curious because you mentioned it briefly, but then I didn't really understand what you meant by
Yeah, all right. It's a very good question because it's complicated, and it's something. Actually, I wanted to say that before, but it's not so important. What I'm telling you is not how it is, but how I look at it. So I can't really say that's the way. There are different kinds of making a plan. There's a very interesting book from Francois, Jullien. It's called About Effectiveness, and he's telling about different philosophies of making a plan. And there's a way of making a plan in terms of imagining how you want to have it, and then you impose it onto the world. That's how we know that very much from European culture, from how things around here work. There's an idea of how things should be, and then you try to make things accordingly. But there are other ways. There are other philosophies of making a plan which work much more in the sense of there's a perspective onto the world. There is an idea of how it could develop, and then you work with the resources and the capacities that you have around it. And then it is much more about how do I explain that? Am I trying to shift this whole space like that? So I call a construction company to make that for me, and we spend €1 million to make that tilt. Or am I in this space trying to imagine it and work with my body, so the relations in the space change, and the effect of what I'm doing is that I'm sliding. Those are different ways of making a plan, following a plan, and that's how the conceptual work and the process work relate to another. I have a friend. He's a Japanese master in ink painting, and when he's making exhibitions of his work, he's sometimes doing live paintings. And I was one of those openings, and he then has a sheet of paper on the wall with a spotlight on it, and the sheet of paper, let's say, is like 1 meter wide and 2 meters long, or 1.5 meters long. And then he's there with his brush and the ink, and then he starts painting, and then he's painting maybe 20 minutes or so, and then the image is done, and it fits perfectly onto the paper. And I asked him how he's doing that, because when I try to, you make a sketch of a map to show people the way, so I start to make a map, and then I'm running out of space, and the left half is all empty. So I was wondering how you do that. It's in front of people. Wow. And he said, yeah, well, the moment that I put my brush onto the paper, I know the whole image. I already have it in my mind. So he knows what he's going to do, and he puts it on the paper. And then I asked him, okay, when do you know it's done? And he said, well, it's a very delicate moment, because there's always this in between of, am I going to do that stroke, or am I done when I do that stroke, it could be perfect, or it could be the one stroke too many, and then it's ruined, or I have to go on until I find again. And then when he told me about that, I noticed, wow, that he said he has it in his mind doesn't mean that he knows each stroke already. He knows the image, but it's not that he knows each leaf of the flower that he's going to paint. And then he said 80% of what he's doing there is basically in his mind already, but the 20% is a very complex mixture of exactly that thing, of all the little details, and when is it done, or is there another stroke. There's a relation of the paper, the ink, and the humidity and the space, which can be different from day to day, which he has to relate to. And it's his physical condition in the moment that is different from day to day. So there is a whole lot of process going on in terms of how to put it on there. And for me, that was very interesting to notice that there's not this conceptual thing that is the source of telling me what to do, and then there's a process happening, but there's an understanding, like an image of what I'm going to do, that is happening the whole time and informing the process actually, and the process informing that thing also. And that, for me, that's why those working phases are also very important, because there's a very direct link for quite a long time. There's maybe a lot of things going on, and in rather early stages of productions it can happen that you suddenly figure out, oh, it's all different, and then you turn it completely around. That's possible. But when you know in some working phases, it doesn't matter if you think it's all different. You just have to go on like that. There's no time. Things have happened and you have to move on, and that's why those phases are important. But the relation of this conceptual work and the process is a very vital and a very dynamic one, I would say. Was that a bit of an answer? Yeah? Mm-hmm.
How to keep, I don't know, pushing, or I don't know. For some, and for me, it's hard to take every idea seriously, mm-hmm. and like be really excited about something. So how to like generate from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very difficult thing. I would say in the first moment it's a kind of honesty to yourself, and there's no such thing as right or wrong, and there's also no such thing as allowed or not allowed. So if you're interested in, or if you have an idea, or if you feel a desire to make a work that is on a topic that you personally would say that is immoral, or you want to make a project working in structures that are totalitarian or so, I would in the first moment always say, okay, yes, sure, let's go for it. That's the great advantage of the concept being a dynamical, flexible thing, because it's gonna evolve. So I would always say, just take everything serious from the very first moment. For me, the important and the difficult thing is that when you start to throw it on the table, and for me that's the first moment of working conceptually, to say let's just throw everything on the table, and you look at everything and try to figure out what is it, what is it? Or maybe you don't even ask what is it, but you only ask what would I like it to be, and be very specific, distinct, and precise about it. Then the first difficult moment is maybe to figure out what can go together, and where maybe you already have to make a decision if you go for this or for that, because it's going in so different directions you can't follow both at the same time. Or you make it two projects and then you try to figure out how it relates to each other. But for me that is more important. I would for the beginning always say, throw it on the table, take everything serious. There's nothing that is not true, there's nothing that is not real, there's nothing that is forbidden, and figure out where is a response. And then, as I said, maybe the most difficult thing is that when you constantly have ideas and you're fascinated with this and with that, to find the moment where you say, okay, cut the noise. That's where I'm going to go. And maybe this is the hardest moment, to figure out what is informing your project, and what is irritating your project, and it can look the same. And that's something that where I don't really have a recipe for you. That is about maybe about experience. This is about trying out, and maybe right there it helps to remind ourselves that nobody's going to die from what we're doing. So I would always just say, just go for it. You're not going to forget about the other thing, right? It's still there. So let's imagine you will have another project, and then you can go for that. For now, we just take that. Sometimes those decisions are just arbitrary. You just say, well, what the heck? I can't make up my mind, and then I just throw a coin. Throwing a coin can be a very valid dramaturgical practice, I would say. Maybe underestimated. Yes?
In relation to like the question you answered, like so you have your things and you're sorting out and everything's on the table and you start to find relations and you're going for it, but then sometimes, for instance, what I'm struggling at the moment, that's why I want to share now, to know in the conditions you are in, the conditions of the project, budget, the realities around it, and your ideas and your concept, and your rehearsal period, etc. So sometimes that if it is a lot, what you already have, and it's great, and it's like you have something, and to yet again another decision there. How do you measure? How much goes into this? Is it maybe too much what you have, or you know what I mean? Or I don't know. And this one thing, and the other thing. Maybe I'll ask after that. Yeah, maybe it's relation, like your loyalty to your concept, and it's, you know what I mean?
Ah, right.
And the relation to the things that, like the conditions you're in.
Okay. You know, people sometimes ask me, what is a dramaturg doing anyway? And that's sometimes very difficult to answer also. I would say that's exactly where I would, if I was a choreographer, I would like to have a dramaturg. Because this working on a concept, that's very interesting when you say staying loyal to your concept. I immediately think, yeah, but the concept needs to be loyal to me too. So it's a vice versa relationship that we have. It's not something that maybe it's a little bit like a constitution where you think this is not something that I have to fulfill, but it's something that conditions my life, and that's something that's supporting me, and that's something that's protecting me and my surrounding. It's something where I can refer to when I lost orientation. I can look into that constitution and say, dignity, yes. and those things. So the concept, I think, if I understand your question correctly, for me is always something that we not have to live up to, but something that gives us orientation. So it is something that when we're lost, and we're getting lost many times, also as a dramaturg, I get lost. I sometimes look at the first notes that I wrote, or maybe the first concept, even for the funding, where I said earlier, I look at it again, think, who wrote that? And then maybe 2 weeks before the premiere, everybody is thinking like, wow, what are we doing anyway? And then I think, why not look at that first thing again? And then suddenly I think, wow, really, it's still the same thing that we're doing. Very interesting. And there's so much fuzz going around, and shall we also do that, and shall we also do that, and this is also interesting, and this could inform everything. We did so much, and all of what we did is not visible for the audience, so how can we bring in all that research? And then you look at that and think, wow, this is all there. Just
And what if it's not there? But anyway, but sometimes it's like.
well, if it's not there, that's also true. And then you had your journey, saying I had a plan. If you make a travel plan, and then you meet somebody, and you plan. I just read the story about the first person on Earth who traveled each country without taking a plane. He just accomplished that a few weeks ago. So you make a plan to do that, right? So you travel here from Munich, and you think, wow, it's a great time to just let go, and I will just travel the next year as well. And first thing you do is you go to Paris. Fabulous. Great. First stop, France, first country. You meet a person, fall in love, you buy a house. Fabulous. Great concept. And you do absolutely the right thing. And there I would say, when I say maybe throwing a coin can be a nice dramaturgical practice, arbitrary decisions can be very relieving. I would also say, let's take everything very serious, and try sometimes take ourselves not too serious and have more fun. And having fun. I personally, actually, when I created, I thought about today. I thought that I start this lecture with my convictions about my work, and I thought, that's maybe not so interesting. But I can say that one of my basic convictions is that I'm doing all of that for the fun, for the joy, for liking it, for liking people, for liking what I see. So in that situation, I would always say where you find joy in what you're doing, it's going to be a good thing. And that's also where you have the strength to step in front of other people. Because when I say part of dramaturgical practice is the moment of publishing and showing it, we all know that's a very delicate moment, because suddenly you lose control over what you're doing. Suddenly you're not the only one anymore who's interpreting of what it is. And then we all know probably this moment before publishing where we think, but maybe I just got it wrong the whole time. Maybe I just had some mental illness for half a year, and then premiere is over. It's going to be really silent, and people will look at me and say, "Wow, really? That's what you thought?" I mean, this is the nightmare scenario that we all feel somewhere back here, right here, before we publish, or maybe the last 2 weeks before we publish, which I call the design phase. And that joy, going where you like it, and not in terms of I like it, but more in terms of it gives me power, it gives me strength, what I'm doing, and what I perceive from what's happening, what I'm doing. That's what also gives you the strength to afterwards step in front of people who ask you, wow, why did you do that? And you can tell the difference between, whoa, why did you do that? And why did you do that? The interest. And you can, in both cases, you can step up and say, I can tell you why. And then it's not a problem if people have other opinions or a different perspective or so. And I think the conceptual work is actually including creating a basis for having the fun and noticing the joy, because it's gonna somehow give something back to you in terms of communication that's happening between you and your conceptual basis. For my work as a dramaturg, I would always say that this kind of conversation is actually the most beneficial thing, where there's something back and forth going on and happening and creating something out of that. And when we have something like this, I would even say it doesn't matter so much if we say it is a good performance or not so good performance, but then we have something where we have a ground from where we can speak, from where we can exchange, where we can have a conversation on this or that. And I don't know how your experience. I actually had the best conversations with people after shows which I thought were really bad. And I then sometimes thought, wow, but I don't know anymore, is then the actual task of what we're doing to create great shows or to create something that offers ground for great conversation, maybe. And that can also inform the process, the conceptual work, and the decision making also. Yes?
I'm curious about communication more,
Yeah.
especially like in the beginning state of the work, and maybe I have a wrong idea about it, but like I picture it like someone comes to you with an idea maybe, or you come to someone with an idea, and what is something in that first communication where you want to bring across this, what you have in your mind, and you have to like make the other person understand what you're talking about. And I think this can be very hard, especially when you're coming from like different positions or like fields. So what is something you appreciate in that first exchange?
Well, what you're referring to is actually when I work with people, I start out in very different situations. I sometimes start out with people who don't really have an idea yet, but we start working on that. And in that moment, for me, it's most beneficial and productive to, what I just said before, to just throw everything on the table, and then I'm trying to accompany a process of figuring out interest, because we are also not always in situations where we can say something is jumping at us and then there's no other way than following that idea. Very often there are a few ideas and it's a little bit like a game show, and you think, wow, maybe there's nothing behind that curtain, or I don't know. So and for that it's very interesting to just throw it out there, lay it out, and just look at everything, and then you figure out and notice, is that really just does that have a basis for more, or is it just for the moment, and then we talked 5 minutes and it's done. So that is sometimes the case. Very often when I have conversations with people about that, it's about are we going to work together or not? And then I like it when people don't have the impression that they have to convince me, and they prepared it in a way so it is appealing to me. But there is for the being able to work together. I think it's very important to be very clear about what you want, what you need, about vague ideas where you don't know where it's going to go and where you maybe cannot promise people if it's going to be this or that. I think that's for working together very important. But I also hear a little bit that it's also about like conversations with partners you want to win over for a funding or a collaboration or co-funding or so. I would say that's a little bit different, because then I would say that you need to consider much more the position of that possible collaborator and figure out how you can formulate your interest in a way that it faces the interest of a possible funding partner or place to present or so. And then the tricky thing is that this is not a way of compromising your project and turning it into something else to fulfill the wishes of a possible collaborator, but to stay true to what you want and what you intend to do, but maybe point out a few things that connect with that institution or with that partner. Depends a lot on where you are in the process of making. Yeah. Did I answer a little bit? Yeah? All right. Maybe you have more questions? It's 11:05. I have one last thing that Teresa was so nice to print for me to show you. I thought I might integrate it into my lecture, but it didn't really happen. But maybe as a little gift for. You know that? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Yeah? You all have seen that? Yeah. In the night sky? Yes. Yeah? Are you sure? Have you seen exactly that? No. Yeah? No. No. So, this is a concept. And of course, I know that you haven't seen the lines in between the dots, and I know that you know that this is handmade, so it's not exact. But the nice thing about it is I show it to you, you instantly recognize it, you instantly know what I'm talking about. I don't even have to say anything. You know that from the Northern Hemisphere night sky. It's a constellation of the Big Dipper. It has different names. In German, it's the Great Wagon. So the interesting thing about this is it's a concept, but when we look at this, we have to admit that on the one hand, the content is real. So there is a light, yes, but anything apart from that is totally imaginative. And arbitrary also in a way. So somebody at some point said, let's connect those points, and then we call it that way. And we can do that because it's reappearing again and again. I don't know how it's about you. Whenever I look in the night sky, I just instantly see that thing. It's like a spell. So there's, for me, there's two very interesting things that people said about it. The one thing is that Walter Benjamin referred to the constellation as something where he takes that to point out the relation between idea, phenomenon, and terminology, creating a relation between those three, basically saying that there is an idea that we have, and there is a phenomenon that makes that idea perceivable, and then there's a certain terminology that addresses that. It's very simply put, and for all Benjamin experts out there, excuse me for abusing that. And then there's an essay from Christel Stelpert, the distributive agency of dramaturgical practice, I'm not sure. And she's actually referring to this term constellation from Benjamin, pointing out in relation to that when we look in the night sky, we see those points of light, but what we don't recognize is that the one thing is that it might be that the light that we see is coming from a star that is not existing anymore, because it's coming such a long way. It can be that thing is already gone and it's only the light. So when I say it's real, it's mainly the light that's real, that we can see. And the other thing is that we see it in 2D. It's flat. So the distance between those dots in relation to another is something that we cannot detect, and especially not to another in relation to our position. So that thing is something where I would say, referring to our work, this is a concept, but it's not a concept about stars. It's a concept about us. It's a concept about how we look into the night sky. It's a concept about how we perceive our world. And that is something where I would say tells us that when we talk about conceptual work for choreographic projects in whichever way, it is inevitable that we consider our own position in this and figure out if the concept that we're making is about that thing, or if that concept that we're making is about that thing. And then maybe that refers also to your question about loyalty, that I would say, are you looking at your concept, or is your concept looking at you? And it can be both ways, and sometimes for me that relates also to when you name an interest or a topic for a project that you're doing. It can be that that is actually the core interest where you circle around, and that will always inform your work that you're doing. It could also be, and you only notice that throughout the process, that this interest is not the center of the project, but only the gate to a field that expands behind it with many other topics and images, motives, or whatever. So the concept that you made maybe turns out to be not that field, but only the entrance to something else. And that is the dynamic reciprocal relation of concept and practice and material that you're working with. Any last words? All right, thank you very much.